Hello and welcome to Grid Live Pre-Race. I'm Isha Azim from Racing with Isha, and with me we have Nicole Fry from Fans in Focus and Joe Samaniego. And a big thank you to Mara Piacentino for collaborating and developing today's script. As always, thank you for your views, especially to our investors Colin, Deshelle, Mark, Robin, David, and Matthew. Robin has doubled her investment. You too can invest through Patreon. The link is in the video description. Or you can always opt to do a one-time investment through Buy Me a Coffee or Super Chat. We will thank you on the air through Super Chat, so be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of our fun content throughout the week. Now, let's get this show on the road. So for Formula One, we are in Belgium at Spa, and a wet-free practice 3 earlier today saw Lance Stroll crash under wet conditions, but he still made it out for qualifying. He made it out of Q1, while Haas, Sonoda, Sargent, and Joe did not. Now, there were no big surprises in Q2, where Albon, Gasly, Ricciardo, Bottas, and Stroll were all eliminated. Q3, the track did start to dry out, but there were still some very wet spots. Nobody was trying slick tires, and certainly nobody was stopping Max Verstappen today. Verstappen was fastest, but second fastest, and starting first tomorrow was Charles Leclerc. So, Nicole, starting with you, with dry conditions tomorrow, how are Leclerc's chances of the win looking?
I'm going to be honest, I don't know about this. I think he has like a 50-50 shot potentially at snagging that win, but as we know historically, this race isn't won from pole position, so it's kind of all up in the air. If the weather is dry, he has a perfect race and Ferrari doesn't mess up any pit stops or strategy goals, then it could be his race, but if anything just slightly goes wrong, then this could just be a toss-up.
I have to agree with you, Nicole. I feel this race, it could be a toss-up. We have drivers in fast cars that could work their ways to the front. Strategy, I think, is going to be really big in this race, especially since, knock on wood, it looks like weather may not be an issue, but this is Spa. Anything can happen. We didn't see any, besides Lance Stroll's crash, qualifying, we did not see any major incidents, but there could always be the potential for major incidents, a safety car derailing everybody. So many unknown factors. His chances are good if he has a flawless race, but there's still a tough crowd that'll be chasing him after turn one, and DRS is going to be super powerful this weekend.
Yes, that is definitely true. Now, if anyone is wondering why Charles Leclerc will be starting in the pole position tomorrow, even though Max was fastest, it's because Max Verstappen had an engine change, the 4th of the year, which resulted in a 10-place grid penalty. So he qualified on pole, but will be starting in 11th place tomorrow. However, we do know that in 2022, he came from 14th place to win this race, and he has won the last 3 as well. Now, the last time Max went 4 or more races without a win was back in 2020, and those races were Imola, Turkey, Bahrain, and the Sakir Grand Prix. Now, Joe, starting with you, do you think Max will snap the winless streak at Spa tomorrow?
That's a hard one. If this was him last year, easily, yes. But this year, McLaren has a fast car. Ferrari, if they could have a good day, flawless day, they could be up there. Mercedes is looking even better too. I think he's going to have a hard time getting around them all. I think his winless streak is going to continue after Spa, Belgium.
Oh, see, Joe, I don't know if I agree. I'm kind of contemplating just kind of like Leclerc's pole position, whether he's going to be able to win this race. I think while Max loves this track and this track seems to really like Max back, I think they've been struggling so much at Red Bull, and they, especially compared to the other teams who are kind of catching up to them, I think this is going to be a much more difficult race than potentially Max is used to. So I think that, while, the winless streak could continue, I do at the end of the day also think that just like we saw the other year, he could come back from the depths of behind the pack, the middle crowd, and kind of go and claim the win.
Well, I think it's going to be certainly interesting to see what Max does tomorrow. But now, if we turn towards another team that had a pretty controversial race last weekend, we have McLaren. And unfortunately, today the conditions did not seem to favor them as they are starting in 5th and 6th. Now, with the penalty being given to Max, Lando will be starting in 4th and teammate Piastri will be in 5th. Today, for McLaren, the rear downforce was just not there today. So, Nicole, do you have any concerns about these two drivers racing each other? And do you believe dry conditions will favor the McLaren drivers tomorrow?
I think dry conditions are going to favor any driver tomorrow. I think that is the preferred conditions for Spa because it is so finicky and it is so tricky and sometimes it is so dangerous. But I don't necessarily have any concerns about Lando and Oscar going against each other. I think, last week was last week, hopefully. I think they're two drivers who can definitely put a race behind them and kind of look forward, whether that was a good race or a bad race. And I think regardless, the team's going to be really concerned about how well their car is performing this weekend. I think obviously they're struggling a little bit more than they were hoping to. Being down in, fifth, sixth, or fourth and fifth now is not ideal for them. I know they'd want to be closer to the top of that starting grid. And so they're going to probably just keep their head down and push forward as much as they can to hopefully end up on the podium.
I think the McLaren team, they have to be feeling pretty good with the potential of dry weather tomorrow. Their cars, they're going to be handling better. We saw Oscar Piastri kicking up the gravel a couple times in qualifying. It looked visually cool, but we know that's not the fastest way around the track. Dry conditions, those cars are fast. The slipstream effect, I think, will be great. The one concern I have is the strategy department. We're going to have a race where we're going to have these high speeds, these big lap times. This is the longest track of the year, essentially. If you want to have a good race, position both drivers, you're going to have a good strategy, especially if Ferrari's on top of their game. I think I'm more concerned about what the strategy department is going to do. How would they handle and manage the race? I think that's where we're going to see the key difference. With the McLaren team, if they could get up towards the front, because I think they can, but if strategy is going to alter their race and put them mid-pack, poorly timed execution, that could be a big determining factor in missing out on a podium or a win.
Yes, definitely. And now turning towards another team, Mercedes, Lewis Hamilton will be starting the race tomorrow in third place, and his teammate George Russell will be in sixth. Now, Joe, we know that the Mercedes cars have been performing better this season than they were last season, and both drivers have also had a win each so far. So where do you rank the Mercedes cars against the Ferraris and McLarens?
I'm thinking third behind both of them. Like the Ferraris, they're fast. It's just they have to get things right. You got Leclerc up front. Sainz, I think, could easily work his way around him. And then the McLarens, if they show up, they're going to be hard to beat. I think McLaren is probably out of those three the top, with Mercedes third.
I would have to agree. I think Mercedes definitely kind of falls behind the other two in this pack, especially when you consider the performance and consistency of McLaren this season so far. Obviously, the Ferraris are, like Joe said, incredibly fast. They're incredibly quick. And when they have really good days, it's fantastic. It's just those bad calls and really unfortunate kind of like one-off decisions that tend to ruin their races. So if, they can do well, then, obviously they're going to be in that second spot right behind McLaren if they don't have any missed calls. But Mercedes overall just seems to struggle a lot more than either team. It doesn't seem to be a matter of bad strategy or bad calls or even bad weather or cars. It just seems like they are just missing something this season that is preventing them from kind of competing with the other competition.
Certainly. Now, I have a follow-up for you, Nicole. So just how critical is the start to gaining the lead for the remainder of the race? And are there any concerns about a first corner crash?
Ooh, I'm always concerned about a first corner crash, especially at Spa. It always makes my nerves come out, my anxiety come out a little bit more than normal because it is so tricky. As far as getting a lead at that first turn or even the first lap tomorrow, I think it is going to be incredibly critical. I think while anything can happen at Spa, obviously getting out in front and having as much of an advantage in that clean air is going to do wonders for whoever is ahead, especially coming out of those couple turns.
Yeah, and just to add to that point too, if you're the second place car and if you have a horrible exit, you're going to be under attack by the third, fourth, fifth place car as they're all making their run to Eau Rouge, up to Radion, that long straightaway. The leader could be running away, put a nice gap, and avoid any DRS concerns. So that first lap, first corner is going to be very critical, and hopefully we have a safe first corner because we've seen some horrendous crashes there, and hopefully we don't see that tomorrow.
Yes, definitely. Now, with that, Nicole, I'll hand it over to you for our lightning round.
All right, so starting off this lightning round, we're going to talk about Sergio Perez, who qualified third, and it will start in second. So, Isha, what kind of finish will it take to get that pressure off of him when it comes to tomorrow's race?
Yeah, I think a podium finish would definitely help lighten that pressure. However, a win would help immensely. But it does matter how he performs for the remainder of the season because he needs consistent performances to really secure that seat because, there is a lot of pressure on him to be performing well. So far the season has been a little rocky. So I think tomorrow's race really matters a lot, but then so does the rest of the season and how consistently he performs.
Yeah, if he has a great race, podium, win, that's going to go a long way. Still, everyone's going to be critical, especially if he starts messing up in this rest of the year. If he has a poor race, that's just going to really add on. Podium win will be a big step in the right direction.
Absolutely. And Joe, we're going to pass this one back off to you. The weather is always a big factor at Spa. What drivers do you think are going to be able to perform the best if we do get a surprise stint of rain for the race tomorrow?
I'm looking at Max Verstappen. He looks so good today. That's one driver. Charles Leclerc, if he's up front, especially the rain occurs, a surprise rain, that's going to really set him up in a good spot as well, too. And I wouldn't count out Fernando Alonso. He's had some good races here and there in the rain. And Lewis Hamilton, depending on where he is as that rain falls. Those are some of the drivers I'm looking at.
Yeah, I think that both Red Bull drivers could perform really well tomorrow, if we do get surprise rain, because today during the rain they were performing well. So I think Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez both have a good shot tomorrow if it ends up raining. And then with that, as Joe mentioned, Fernando Alonso, he's got a lot of experience, probably one of the most experienced drivers on the racetrack tomorrow. So, if we do see rain, I think that he'll also be able to perform well.
Yes. So Fernando Alonso is actually starting in eighth tomorrow, and he's kind of been overlooked for a podium finish this weekend. Do you guys think that this is something that is good, or do you think Fernando Alonso could potentially end up on the podium?
I just said that I think he's going to perform well, but I don't see him on the podium. I know he has a lot of experience, but the car also matters a lot. And if we do end up seeing rain tomorrow, or if it's just a dry track, I think it could be really tricky. And looking at the drivers that are currently ahead of him, we do have the Mercedes, we have the Ferraris, the McLarens, the Red Bulls. So I think it's just going to be tough for him to get to that top three, and I just don't see it happening.
I don't see it happening either. I'm thinking the highest, maybe fifth place, because you'll still have the two McLarens, a Ferrari, a Red Bull. Which Red Bull, we don't know. I think fifth is the highest he could get up.
All right. And then finally, Joe Sauber, no pace this weekend. Is Joe on his way out of Formula One?
I'm going to say yes. Unfortunately, it's game time's running up for him.
Yeah, I totally agree with Joe here. I don't think that Joe is going to be having a seat next season. So
All right. Well, thank you. That was a wonderful lightning round, and I will pass it back off to Isha to finish us off for Formula One.
that's right. Now, taking a look at some drivers that we have not talked too much about yet. Esteban Ocon. So he has made it official. He will be going to Haas next year, and he will be joining teammate Oliver Behrman, who impressed everyone at Jeddah when he substituted for Carlos Sainz. Now, Haas is scoring more points, and Nico Hulkenberg has been bringing Haas a majority of the points so far. So, Nicole, starting with you, do you believe that Ocon can bring Haas up to another level next season? And how much help do you think Oliver Behrman's going to need being the rookie in the team?
So I think this is a really interesting question. I spent a lot of time this morning thinking about it because I don't know if Ocon is necessarily going to bring a lot of difference or a lot of immense capability to Haas, depending on how good their car is. I think that's really what it comes down to. I think if the car is good next year, Ocon is going to be able to deliver and perform beautifully. But if he's not feeling comfortable with the car, if he's not feeling comfortable with his new team, then he's going to struggle a lot. But on the other hand, I do think that Ollie Behrman coming into this team, especially with having Ocon as his teammate, is potentially a really, really good ground for him to kind of start his Formula One career on. As we know, Haas does a pretty good job at supporting their drivers. They tend to be a good team for new drivers to kind of slowly develop their skills, especially drivers who, like Ollie Behrman, I think have a very interesting future ahead of them, and a lot of hope from a lot of different Formula One teams that he's going to perform well. But when you also consider the fact that Esteban Ocon specifically is going to be his teammate, a man who, as I think we will all probably agree, tends to be quite emotional in a good way. He tends to be very supportive, wanting to work with his team and his teammates, but on track is just a little bit ruthless, who stands up for what he wants to do and his capabilities and his positions. I think this is a really good team and a really good partnership for Ollie Behrman to kind of cut his teeth with next season. And I think him going into this team as a rookie is just going to be a really wonderful thing for him.
I have to agree with you, Nicole. I feel Haas has been good when it comes to rookies, just giving them at least some time to develop. We saw that with past drivers, and they seem to be one of those teams where, hey, if you do good results, we'll be keeping you around for a while. Magnussen has been there a long time, Grosjean for quite some time as well, too. I think with Esteban Ocon, I like your point that if he has a good car and Haas seems to be working that way towards having better cars, he's going to be in a good spot. And I am curious to see how he could do if he gets a car that's not exactly that great. Can he really help the team get it to where it could be better and better? I'm anticipating that Esteban Ocon, he is hoping to continue getting top 10 finishes. That's his priority. With Behrman, this is a driver where I feel he has to be excited because the way Haas has been driving with both Kevin Magnussen, Nico Hülkenberg, this is not the team that we saw 3 or 4 years ago where they were almost the laughing stock of F1. Now they're at the point where I think they are making the right progress. They're adding more. I'm really interested to see, and I think this is a great pairing because at the end of the day, Behrman, he's a rookie, but he has done F1. He knows a little bit about it. He's not just going to be thrown in the deep end, but at least it's with the Haas team that is on the right track, not the Haas team of Schumacher and Mazepin that were clearly going the wrong direction.
Yep, I certainly think it's going to be interesting to see how this driver pairing pans out next season. And I think that both drivers will be able to push each other to do better. So it's going to be interesting to see that. But now looking at a driver we were talking about earlier in this show, Sergio Perez, we know he's going to be starting in second and he's going to be under pressure. Now, Daniel Ricciardo qualified 13th, Yuki Tsunoda in 18th, but he does have a penalty that will push him to the back of the race. So assuming Perez finishes on the podium, do the V-Carb drivers need to finish in the points to continue their case of being a contender for that second Red Bull seat? Joe, what do you think?
I think for Ricciardo, he has to finish in the points because he's getting pretty close to finishing the points a little bit more regularly. He's starting towards near the top 10. You can only work your way up. And there are some drivers out there that I feel he could potentially get around. Maybe Fernando Alonso, if that Aston Martin is just not on top of things. If one of the drivers up ahead have bad luck and do not finish the race, now he's looking at potentially 11th, 10th place. So I do think he could get there. Esteban Ocon in that Alpine could be another driver that could easily get around. Yuki Tsunoda, though, I don't know. If he could get in the top 10, that'd be a great effort considering he's starting at last. Potentially driver of the day performance. But I don't think it's going to really determine his role when it comes to getting more closer to that Red Bull seat that Perez has or going back. This is the last race before the summer break. I think at the end of the day, if he gets points, that's a good day for him.
I kind of agree. I think as far as Ricciardo and his future at Red Bull and his potential taking over of another seat, potentially teaming up with Max Verstappen again, I think that it's pretty obvious in my opinion at this point that he is kind of the main contender. So I don't think he really needs to finish in the points for Red Bull to feel like that's maybe a strong decision because he has history with the team and he has history driving with Max. Yuki, on the other hand, I think if he even wants to remotely still possibly be considered for that Red Bull seat, he's going to have to perform. He's going to have to finish in those points because unlike Ricciardo, he doesn't have, I think, as much prestige within the team yet for whatever reason. And I think because of that, any points he can score is just going to help his case.
All right, now looking at the two Aston Martin drivers, Lance Stroll made it to Q2 and his teammate Fernando Alonso made it to Q3. So Nicole, with dry conditions, is Stroll a driver that you anticipate making his way to the front tomorrow?
I don't think so. I think Stroll, in my mind, is a good driver, but I don't know, given the conditions and the challenges that Spa presents, especially with so many teams kind of being so close together when it comes to the way that they're performing and driving at this track, I think Stroll, even if he does have a really flawless race, is going to struggle immensely to kind of get to the front of the grid tomorrow. And the other teams are definitely not going to make it easy on him. So I think he's going to have a lot of difficulty if he's able to do it.
It's going to be a difficult day because one of the things we haven't talked a lot about, Alex Albon, great qualifying effort, and Dow Williams at times can be super fast. If he could continue being that fast, it's going to be hard for anyone to get around. And I think, especially with the way the tires are going to be, if we have that dry race, if you're battling somebody like Albon or just trying to get around, or worse, the DRS train effect, that's just going to slow you down and prevent you from getting towards the point. So I think Lance Stroll is going to have a really tough time in this race tomorrow.
All right, now tomorrow we have several drivers who are looking at working their way to the front under dry conditions. We have the McLaren drivers, Russell, Sainz, Verstappen, and perhaps even Lance Stroll. Now, the tire management will be one determining factor for strategy tomorrow. So, Joe, Spa is such a large track. Does this make the undercut more powerful?
If the tire degradation is something where we're seeing as soon as you come out of the pits with fresh tires and you're getting significant time, yeah, that undercut's going to be super powerful. I'm really curious to see how the teams are going to react, because the simplest way to do it is just, okay, right away, come in and pit the next lap, try to prevent that. But if we're seeing that, okay, whoever's pitting first, they're going to gain so much time, would a team try to stay out a little longer for that overcut? Maybe try to get it down to where at the end of the race, they have much fresher tires compared to somebody that done 2 undercut pit stops and then have older tires at the end. I'm really curious to see how the strategy is going to work out. It's just going to be a matter of how the tire fall off is throughout the race.
I would agree. I think the undercut here at Spa can be really, really powerful if teams are able to utilize it and get, quite frankly, just super lucky. Spa, again, we've talked about how tricky it is, especially potentially with rain. Given how close the pack is, I think at the end of the day, the undercut is going to work very well for some teams, especially if they have the ability to be lucky enough to be in a good track position where it can definitely provide more of an advantage compared to all of their competitors.
All right, now with that, Nicole, let's head over to pick a winner where we too can score some points.
All right, pick a winner. We only have one race this weekend. We are racing Formula One at Spa, as we've been discussing all morning. Bonus points are available if you are outside the top 10. Kiska, the Grid Network dog, of course, is going with Max Verstappen, her favorite. And we invite you to comment on who you think is going to win the Belgian Grand Prix. Isha, we're going to start with you. Who do you think is going to win this Formula One Grand Prix?
I feel like Charles Leclerc would be a popular opinion among people, but I'm going to go with the man starting second, Sergio Perez. I think the Red Bulls, especially if there's rain, have a really good chance of performing well. I don't think Max will be able to get to the front, but I think Sergio Perez is going to do a great job, and I think Charles Leclerc might have some issues defending him.
I think we're going to be all over the board with this one. I'm going with Lewis Hamilton, that Mercedes. I think they got a good opportunity to go out there, get a win. They just need to have that clean start. The strategy, I think Mercedes is one level above the Ferraris. The McLarens, if they're stuck behind Lewis Hamilton, he's going to take the win. Lewis Hamilton is my pick for the winning.
And I'm going to have to go with a different answer from both of you. I'm going to stick with Kiska, and I'm going to go with Max Verstappen. I think he's done it once, he's done it twice, he's done it so many times before. Why shouldn't he win again at Spa?
Yeah. Then we could see Adam saying Lando Norris for the win. And then for 7th, George Russell, and no Red Bull on the podium. That'll be really interesting. Nicole, let's get into our 7th place picks for Spa.
Yes. So, Isha, we're going to start with you. Who do you think is going to finish 7?
I think this is really Tough. I was thinking that maybe we could see the McLarens drop down a bit. Oscar Piastri could be there, but now I'm going to say I think Fernando Alonso might finish in 7th place.
That's a good 7th place pick. Oh, I don't know who I'm going to go with. I think I'm going to go with Albon.
Interesting choice. I am going to have to agree with Isha. I think Fernando Alonso potentially could end up in 7th. We'll see. It would be nice to see him with a couple of points this weekend. If not, maybe a little bit closer to the podium.
All right, now with that, that's all for today's show. Let's head into our closing. Tomorrow, we will be on the air around noon Eastern, assuming there are no red flags or delays. Be sure to hit subscribe and hit the bell icon so you do not miss Grid Live wrap-up. As always, a big thank you to our investors on Patreon for investing in the Grid Network. You can get your name read at the beginning of each show if you click on the link in the video description. And Super Chat, Buy Me a Coffee are always appreciated as well. Learn more on gridnetworktv.com and Grid Network TV across social media. Also, check out our LinkedIn page if you would like to join this amazing Grid Network team. Now, that's all for today's show. For Joe and Nicole, I'm Isha. Thank you and enjoy the races.